podcast. So excited to have you here. You're in for a treat with a special episode all about professional development in school communications. You guys, last week's podcast episode was sharing 7 steps to secure funding for your role in PR, of how to get funding for professional development. Well, this week we're going to talk about different professional development opportunities for you in your role of school communicator. We're going to be talking about organizations. We're going to be talking about free courses. We're going to be talking about advanced degrees. We're going to be talking about the APR, and we're going to be talking about it all with Janet Swiecichowski. She has been dedicated her life to ongoing learning. She's even going through a doctoral program right now, which is amazing, even in the pandemic, going through all of that. And so she's really going to talk about her journey in school PR and how this ongoing professional development has really helped propel her career and made her, more effective, more efficient, and just been able to help more people because of her commitment to continuing to learn. So I'm very excited. It's a longer interview, but we really break down a lot of different opportunities for you. And my goal out of this podcast episode is to find out what's your next step. What are you planning to do next in your career to further your learning? I'd love to know. You can email me, andrea@socialschoolforedu.com. You can also just tweet me at Andrea Gribble. Let me know what your next step is after listening to this episode. And in the show notes, this is episode 73, but in the show notes, you're going to find links to all of the organizations and opportunities that we kind of talk about. So you're definitely going to want to check those out. Now let's get to our interview with Janet Swiecichowski on professional development in school communications. Today's K-12 PR tip is simple. What are you doing to advance your skill set? Janet's going to talk about it today. Every day we should be learning something new. So there are a lot of opportunities free out there on social media, little courses or downloads or things that we can learn. There are people that we can talk to. There's organizations we can join. I want you to think about, what are you doing to advance your learning, to keep you current, to keep you growing, and to keep you the best school communicator that you can be, right? And so that's just my tip today is, what are you doing? What are you investing in? You're investing in yourself. Might not be money, it might just be time, but I really want to make sure that that is a priority for you. Things change so fast, tools and techniques and all of that. We need to keep up. And so I hope that you are keeping your learning on the top of your priority list as well. Now let's get to our interview with Janet Swiecichowski. Welcome back to the podcast, Janet Swiecichowski. How are you?
I am fabulous today.
That is,
We have an exciting day, so everything's great here.
yeah, and you are shining bright with your sparkly jacket. If people are watching us on YouTube, otherwise they're listening in. I'm welcoming you back because you were first interviewed on this podcast back on episode 47. I called it a masterclass because it truly was a masterclass. But just for our listeners who are tuning in, why don't you give kind of a brief introduction to who you are and what you do?
Sure. Janet Swiecichowski. It's much easier to say than it looks. And I am vice president at CELPR. That stands for Creative, Effective, and Lasting. And we are a small family firm that focuses about 70% of our business in school public relations. We also cover healthcare and finance. But before joining CEL, I have a 20 plus year career in school public relations. So I'm thrilled to be having come out of day-to-day school operations, just like your listeners. I'm thrilled to be here to talk with you today.
Yeah, and now you get to help all of those school communicators in a different way, which is amazing. Well, today is a little bit of a special episode, Janet, and I haven't done a lot of these pointed episodes, but I was recently talking with some of my members in my membership community, and they said, Andrea, I really want to know about professional development in my role as a school communicator. Because again, Janet, when I started in this like career, I didn't even know it existed. And so, a lot of people just kind of end up in it from journalism or as a teacher or a reporter, whatever. And so I really wanted to focus on that. And I think you are really an experienced communicator who's really made a lifelong commitment to professional development. And that's why I wanted you to be my guest to talk about this topic. But could you tell me about how you first got started in school communications and then maybe some of your professional development, journey?
Sure. Well, I was blessed with a fabulous superintendent because I didn't know school PR existed either. I had come out of a communications and speech degree with secondary ed, and I was working with a fabulous superintendent that said, I want to create a PR office. I want you to lead it, and I want you to go off and learn everything you can about it. And he connected me with with NSPRA. He connected me with WISPRA at the time in Wisconsin, and said, "Get involved and learn everything you can." And then he connected me with a fabulous mentor, Rick Kaufman. We were both in Wisconsin at the time. And it's really something, we always say everything I need to know about school PR I learned at NSPRA, and it's so true. Such a great supportive network and connection. Yeah.
So NSPRA stands for the National School Public Relations Association. It's a
Mhm.
national, but almost international, because we've got Canada and US schools that are part of that. I think I don't know, how many members are there now? Do you know?
Oh, well over 1,700.
Okay,
Yeah.
and really growing under the new direction of Executive Director Barbara Hunter.
Mhm.
So I agree, NSPRA was a great starting point for me. It's where I really got connected to people and opportunities and learning. And so as a first step, you did that right away. And how cool to have a superintendent that was so like, go learn everything you can.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I was in my second or third year, probably my second year, the first time he put us in for a presentation with NSPRA. So I've actually been presenting at NSPRA more years than I want to count, but it's at least 18 years now consecutively that I've presented at the national conference because he opened that door for me. Yeah.
Right, and you do such a great job of sharing. And then you also mentioned WISPRA, which is the Wisconsin chapter of school
Mhm.
public relations. So most states, I think there's over 30 states that have a state chapter that's kind of
Mhm.
associated with the national chapter. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yep. Mhm.
And so how do people get involved or find out if they have a state chapter in there?
Sure. So go to the NSPRA website, nspra.org. And I believe it's probably under the About Us tab. There's an area that is chapters, and it should give you your chapter and also tell you who the leadership is in that chapter so that you can reach out. And then, of course, you can also Google. It's going to be a SPRA chapter, SPRA chapter. So whether it is the Capital SPRA chapter or the Chesapeake Bay SPRA chapter or Sun SPRA or T SPRA or Cal SPRA or Min SPRA is where I am now. So just Google a SPRA chapter of the National School Public Relations Association in your state.
Yeah, those state connections are so important because obviously, well, especially with COVID, right? There's different
Mhm,
mandates depending on what
mhm.
state you're in, and getting that connection with other people that are nearby. I'm part of Minspra as well, and I love the Facebook group that we have because people will start asking questions, or this reporter is asking for this information. Has anybody else got this request? And it's just a great spot to bounce ideas off of, right?
Right, absolutely. And we're in those, there are a couple different Facebook groups that we contribute to. And give feedback on and ask questions. It's a great resource. Uh, Anything you are dealing with in school public relations, someone has dealt with before. And know that you are not alone. Someone has dealt with it. So reach out, whether you call your chapter or call the national office and just say, I'm struggling with this issue. Who should I talk to? And they will connect you with someone or they'll answer it right for you. Barbara Hunter is a former school PR person. She's the executive director at NSPRA now. She's a former school PR professional, former consultant, and accredited professional. They have a couple accredited APRs at the national office that can help advise and counsel on anything.
Yeah, and though both of the organizations, the state chapters and the national chapter, are very affordable.
Yes.
So you're not talking thousands and thousands of dollars for you to be involved in those organizations. So I definitely think that's a great first step.
Hmm.
And then
Absolutely.
you mentioned that you got connected with a mentor, Rick Kaufman. And so can you just tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, my superintendent at the time had been Rick's assistant superintendent in his prior district. And the other thing that we know about schools is there's an incredible network of administrators, right? So when you have a good relationship with a school PR person, too many administrators don't know how to use school PR people. uh, they know they need communications, but if you are it's a tough hire when you're an administrator. When I left my last school district, our HR person said to me, I'm going off on a tangent, sorry, but he said to me, I can hire for any position in this district except yours. I really don't understand what you do, how you do it, you just do it. And it's a different skill set. You're the only one when you're in school PR and communications, you are the only one in your role frequently, unless you're on a team. And so there's this network of great professionals. And Jerry Freitag was my soup, and he told me contact Rick. And Rick and I were both in Wisconsin at the time. He then left and went to Colorado and then came back to Minnesota. And now we're both in Minnesota. And we continue to network and build off each other's skills, as well as so many other key professionals around the country.
Yeah.
You'll find the NSPRA group very generous with their time and their files and their resources, so that you don't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, that's important. So beyond, some of the organizations that you joined, what kind of continuing education did you seek out for you?
Sure. So right away in my first district, I started taking some grad classes in public relations because I was a general comms background. I really didn't know about public relations. So I started taking some grad level classes in public relations, research, theory, quantitative and qualitative methods, all of that, and ethics and law. Those were I took, I think, 5 classes, graduate level courses, starting on a master's program, and then life got in the way and we moved. And so we came up to Minnesota, and it took me a long time to get back to my master's, but I eventually got back and then finished a stratcom program. So one way is certainly our universities still have great courses. Are the information, the programs available on demand through NSPRA. There are a lot of resources, and they're continuing to refresh and rebuild a lot of the material that's up on NSPRA. I also belong to Public Relations Society of America, and PRSA has a vast archive of webinars and courses and certificate programs, all of that. So there is no reason today to say that you can't find what you need to learn. We're all becoming self-directed learners, just like we want for our kids. And there is so many opportunities, both formal and informal. I think the key is to commit to learn something new every day and to remain curious that you have blind spots and you don't know it all yet. I remember when I was very young and first starting in my career, and I thought I knew it all. I thought, why don't these administrators know how to communicate? They should just follow all of my advice. And then you go through different experiences in your career and you learn how much you don't really know. So always be curious.
I love that advice. I was just recently listening to a podcast just about entrepreneurship, which obviously I ventured in when I started this back in 2014, and the relationship between successful entrepreneurs and curiosity, and
Mhm.
figuring out what works and what doesn't, and actually being able to go into things knowing that it's not going to work. There's a lot of things that don't work the first time, and I was thinking in that interview, I'm like, a lot of this is the same with school PR, because there's a lot of things that are not going to work, and it's not a failure. It's you're learning and you're figuring out what doesn't work so that you can pivot and reiterate and figure out what else works. But I really think that's a strong characteristic to have, probably in any career, to be successful, right?
Oh yeah, and there are fundamentals that we have to have. You have to know the fundamentals of um, opinion leaders. You have to know how the public makes decisions about opinions. I think we need to learn some fundamental two-way communication theories, and how change gets adopted is another. Those are fundamentals that you pick up in a PR 101 class. So if you've never had a PR 101 class, even on LinkedIn, go take a PR 101 class. About half of our profession comes over from journalism, and journalism is great on the writing and the storytelling, but in public relations we are shaping and framing the narrative and the story, and in journalism you're reporting what happened. And so we've got to think about what are the goals that we're trying to achieve in public relations, what are the behaviors or the changes that we want, whose support do we need. So there is the fundamentals that is important to learn. So many ways, the APR process or other courses, to do that. uh, but then there is also the fact that once we know our fundamentals, we are dealing with humans and sometimes they are unpredictable. So we have to have that growth mindset, that we're going to learn from our mistakes and we'll keep moving. I think the hardest thing for school PR is that when you do make a mistake, thousands of people see it. It's very public. And so you certainly want to have some proofreading and other safeguards and guardrails put in place, but know that we've got to let go of perfection.
Yeah. Um, Great stuff that we just talked about. I just want everybody to know we're going to have some links to some of these resources that we're talking about. NSPRA, I'll make sure to have where you can find the state chapters. PRSA you mentioned. So that's Public Relations.
Society of America.
Okay.
Yep,
And you're still a member of that, is that right?
I am.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm.
And so that's PR that's beyond just schools, but
Right.
there are schools in there. And so I'm sure in that organization, there's a lot of things that you can learn from other industries that you could possibly apply to schools, right?
Absolutely. The fundamentals of public relations cross all industries. You're all identifying audiences, you're setting goals and objectives, you're using similar tactics and tools, and similar strategies. It's just a matter of then getting deeply ingrained in the content knowledge of your industry. So when I was going through the APR and when I later taught classes and for accreditation, which is APR, there were people from the defense industry in my classes, the healthcare industry, the financial sector. I had people from Target and Best Buy, DOD. I mean, it's just such a broad range. But when it comes to the practice of public relations, which is about building mutually beneficial relationships with the people upon whom our success or failure depends for any organization. When it comes to the fundamentals of public relations, it goes across all industries.
Yeah, very, very, very true. You mentioned APR. So
Yep.
tell me a little bit about APR. What are some of the requirements? Because I know there's some like minimum years of experience, and then what does that process look like? That it's certainly been a focus on NSPRA, to really promote and support folks that are going for their APR. But tell me about it.
Sure. So accreditation in public relations is really the gold standard that says you can walk into any organization and you have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to be a strategist and to provide public relations counsel. So when we think about that level of strategist, most of us don't come out of college at a strategist. We're pretty technical and getting the newsletters out and get the post done and all of that. Uh, but when you're thinking about, I'm ready to move up to be a strategist, I want people to take me seriously when I give advice and counsel. That's when you think about, I'm going to go for APR. APR, again, goes across all industries. So it is governed by the Universal Accreditation Board, which is made up of 9, maybe 11 now, professional organizations, including Public Relations Society of America, including the National School Public Relations Association, NSPRA, including religious communicators, and I can't name all 9, but it's on their website. Even the communications professionals out of Puerto Rico are part of it. So it is an international accreditation body. It covers about 6 areas of KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities that you test on. And when I think about APR, I think about it's an analogy to a CPA for accountants.
Okay.
We have APR for public relations. It says that you are accredited, you have taken an advanced level of study, you have sat for 4-hour test is what it is, multiple choice test in a computer testing center. And in APR, you're also presenting professional work through a campaign that uses the 4-step process. So you're thinking about research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. Those are the 4 steps, and can have demonstrated outcomes from your work. APR is very much focused on behavioral public relations. And when I say behavioral, it says, what do we want an audience or stakeholder group to know or be able to do as a result of our communications efforts? So we are definitely talking about change management initiatives and moving things forward. Typically, when I think about what we want them to know or be able to do, I use 3 A's. We either want them to be aware, we want an attitudinal change, support or not support, or we want them to take action. Come help us do this. So those 3 A's, awareness, attitude, and action, are usually how, when I'm writing a communications plan, I will write the objectives. I want parents to read to their children every night by 20 minutes so that we can support our mission and objectives. Then what in communications do we do to encourage parents to read to their children every night?
Right.
And how do we measure whether we got there?
And if you are interested in the APR, is it true you need to be in school communications or communications for about 5 years? Is that what they want?
That's what we recommend. There is not a requirement.
Okay.
But it used to be a requirement. It is now a recommendation. And that recommendation is because you really need to be at that strategist level or you just won't be successful. And usually there's some professional experience that you obtain in those first early years of your career that will get you there. A lot of people say, well, I was a reporter for 20 years and I'm moving from our hometown newspaper over to the public relations office for the schools. I should be able to do that. And you'll find that there are different experiences and different skill sets required. And just like I would not expect to walk into a TV station and get the anchor chair my first day on the job because I've been communicating for 20 years. We don't expect TV anchors to walk into a strategist position in their first 5 years on the job.
Yeah. No, what I've heard, and I don't have my APR, but what I've heard is a lot of people that start studying for it, and there is a lengthy process to support you because it's scary. I'm thinking a 4-hour test. I'm starting to get test anxiety.
Might want to study.
Yeah. But there is support for that. But if you're once you start learning it, you're like, oh, well, I do that, and now it has a name. Like you really learn some of the formalities of probably what you've been doing in those 5 years or all of your experience. And now it's like you can, I don't know, it reminds me of when I went for my MBA, when I was working in corporate America, and everything made sense because like I was already doing it. And so it was much easier to learn and then make sense of. So would you say that's pretty accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Everyone says, I feel like I've been flying by the seat of my pants sometimes. And now I know that there is a method and there are steps that I can go through. And there's research that says this is the right thing to do, even though I felt in my gut that it was. It also puts you in a better position to be able to articulate why you feel that little feeling in your gut that says this is the right thing to do. Typically when you walk up to a superintendent and say, well, it's my opinion that this is just the right thing to do, and it may not be respected. But if we come in and say the research is really clear that in this situation these are the appropriate steps we need to go through, and there is theory and knowledge that says that this will work, and I'm more confident in my ability to provide the advice and counsel.
Yeah. So we've covered a lot already. We've covered some organizations that you can be a part of, which also has professional development included. But those relationships that you build in those, I think, are really important. We've got some advanced degrees that you can probably get at any of your local colleges. Your strategic communication degree what college was that through? Can I ask, Janet?
Sure, that was the University of Minnesota
Okay.
in the journalism school and Stratcom program, strategic communications program.
Okay, and then we've got the APR that you
Mhm.
can do. Now, are you going in another? Are you in another program right now?
I am. But before we jump to my doctorate,
Okay.
let's go back to the master's because I think there are a lot of options. I often get questions from people to say, should I go into a degree in strategic communications? I feel like I know communications. What about MBA? Should I get my degree in education and a specialist degree for administrator of some sort? Or maybe I'm really interested at some point in leaving schools and want to be in a for-profit corporation and really work on marketing and digital marketing. So when you think about the master's degree level, so my path, I started with my APR because it was the shortest and easiest to do and less expensive. So I started there and got that done right at my 5-year mark. It was very early in my career. Then later, I went back and got my master's, and when I completed my master's, I was many years out of college, 10 years into the profession, and the profession and communications technology had changed a lot and continues to evolve rapidly. And being in that master's program, I was getting the latest cutting edge communications tools, technologies, theories, practices, studies, all of that. So I really thought waiting was great. Whatever you do, whichever program, think about what is the next step that you want in your career,
Mhm.
and then build that skill set, whether it's an MBA, educational degree, digital marketing, know that it will cross over. So then the next one that I went for, I'm currently enrolled at the University of Southern California, Rossier School of Education, and that is in organizational change and leadership. So we're looking at a lot about things that go into establishing change in an organization, how an organization is structured, learning and motivation theory, accountability systems, and all of that is just really exciting.
And you can apply that obviously to your company, but every school and organization that you work with, right, to really understand that.
Absolutely. I spend most of my time talking one on one with superintendents or cabinet. So we're talking about strategies to get through difficult situations, and we have plenty of difficult, challenging situations right now. And so there is this situation in my career was just somehow perfectly timed for me. That I had started into this program right before COVID hit. It's an online program. I knew online learning pretty well by the time COVID hit. And so then talking with um, people in the medical profession. In my program, there are people from many different industries and corporations. So we're talking about how they're handling their employee, getting employee engagement, keeping employees engaged remotely, all of those situations. So it's just been a wonderful gift. And to work with some of the top leading educators across the country. Diversity and inclusion is obviously a key theme through the program and through every corporate structure right now, that every corporate goal that is being set is also looking at diversity, inclusion, and equity. So it's been perfectly timed.
That's awesome. And just last week on my podcast, I just talked about getting professional development funding for your role in school communications. So, do you have any advice, Janet? I mean, were your APR, like your course, and then like your master's program, was that something that was help sponsored by your school, or if can you share about that?
Yes, it was. And again, I go back to Jerry Freitag, was a developer. And I think every superintendent should be a developer. Uh, the communications function is an integral management function in any school district. It is as valuable as your balance sheet and what your CFO knows. Your communications and the amount of goodwill that you are building in your community, particularly today in a divided community, is critically important. And it takes more than somebody that's going to put out a newsletter often. So invest in your people that are in your district and know your community and grow their skill set. So Jerry fully supported, just like every principal had a budget to be part of their professional organization, our communications office had a budget to be part of our professional associations. He actually put APR in my annual goals. And so I was held accountable for completing it. And then when I did complete it, there was an incremental salary increase as well. Likewise, when I went on to get my master's in education, it's harder to get school districts to pay for advanced degrees simply because everybody in the district is going for advanced degrees. It's a really expensive benefit. But if you have the opportunity to take advantage of any tuition credit, if it's available to your teachers or other administrators, it should also be available to your communications professionals.
Okay.
So there are sometimes opportunities to do that and talk. You can also look at when you're bringing in if you're doing the NSPRA webinars, for example, and sometimes there's a fee for that professional development. Host it in a room with all of your principals, invite them in, and that is a district professional development session. Or, your social media. Look at everybody in your district that touches social media, and bring your whole social media group together to work with Andrea's group in one of the podcasts or one of the webinars. So there are lots of opportunities to be creative with budgets. There's also a good amount of money right now through ESSER and all the pandemic relief about how are we going to re-engage audiences and parents and staff into the education system again of our children. So make sure you're looking at those opportunities. When you are adopting a new technology, communications technology, website, notification system, anything like that, invest in bringing some of their trainers in and make it more than the technology. Make sure that they are bringing you trainers that can teach you the strategy behind what you're doing. The goals, help build on the goals that your organization wants to achieve.
Absolutely. So a lot of opportunities for some of those advanced degrees. There are a lot of free opportunities, like we talked about too. And I just want to touch quick. I mean, well, besides advanced like master's degrees, there are a lot, and you mentioned it before, digital marketing certificates and some of those things. So don't be afraid to connect with those. I mean, they're great courses. Some of even the community colleges and things have those. So not quite as big, maybe of price tags. Great programs. Anything to comment on that?
Well, I subscribe to Marketing Profs, Creative Brief, Digital Marketer. Um, PRSA also has a certified crisis communications counselor. So there are lots of those badge programs, is what they're really called,
Okay.
popping up. I think what's most important is that you're doing something. The other one that I listen to regularly is Mind Valley for my mental health and mental well being and professional life. We are in a really high stress position that demands a lot of us, and we have got to be taking care of ourselves not only with our intellectual skills applied to the profession, but how we can bring in calm in a crisis situation, how we can be a voice of reason. And if we are anxious ourselves, we are not going to bring calm to a crisis. So I think also investing just in your overall well-being.
Yeah, definitely. Um, Goes well with our K-12 PR well
It does.
campaign that CEL is helping kind of fuel. So you said that's Mind Valley. Is that like a podcast or is that a website?
It's a online course,
Oh,
but
okay.
there's some free webinars as well.
Okay.
And
Perfect.
it is really about goal setting and taking care of yourself and setting your own goals and direction.
Yeah, perfect. I just want to mention a few other free certifications. You know,
Oh,
you've got
sure.
Google Analytics, they have, and I'll link to that. HubSpot has a great opportunity to do a lot. And thinking of SEO and marketing and all of this stuff that we're expected to know, these were all from a member of ours, Lori Marini, out in the Northern Ozaki
Yeah.
school district in Wisconsin. And she also has semrush.com. They have a whole academy out there. And there are a lot of actually companies, education companies, that provide a lot of either free content, and I'm one of them. But
Mhm.
we also have, like our paid membership program to support you with social media. So there's just a lot out there. Look at what you need, and I love your advice, Janet. Just always be doing something to learn every day, because things
Absolutely.
change so fast. I've got a question for you as we wrap up. Time to do this, because
Mhm.
we are all strapped for time. I really liked when you said, hey, when you got it, life got in the way, right? You started a family, you moved, and all of that, and so you had to kind of put the master's program a little bit on hold. But what would you say to somebody that says, dude, this job is like all consuming, like I do not have time for this? What would you say to them?
Well, number one, and this is NSPRA advice that I got a long time ago from a colleague. We set our own deadlines and we set our own boundaries. And so if we are freaking out because a deadline is set, our publication has to get to the printer by X date. I'm going to ask who set that deadline and what's it driven by, because often it's our inner drive. So practice a little patience and grace with yourself. Number two, invest in yourself. Um, I don't know what the right amount is. Cortana on Microsoft tells me 2 hours every week is learning time, right? And if I don't have it on my calendar, it tells me to schedule it. It reminds me to do that. We have to invest in ourselves. I cannot tell you how many professionals I have interviewed for jobs over the years that did not keep their skills up and I could not hire them. And it was heartbreaking to have a fabulous volunteer from my community come in and apply for a job at 45, 50, 55, and have no current skills, and expect to say, I can learn if they haven't been learning all the way. How many people I've seen that burn out of this career, and when they try to transfer the career, they haven't kept up their skills. So when you talk about SEO and Google certifications, that should be a given. um, we live in a Google world. We live in a digital world. And if we don't understand how that technology is finding our customers, we cannot possibly be effective in communicating and making sure our school district is found. We're doing a ton of work right now at CEL in SEO, search ranking, for school districts that don't understand why they're not coming up, except for the people sitting at their desk inside their Google Suite, right? So if anyone once it calls on that, we're happy to work. But you get to a point in this career, you get to a point in any career where if you have not kept up your skills and grown and changed, you will get to a point where your price point tops out the market. And it is heartbreaking to see mid career professionals say, the job I used to do, they won't pay me the wage I want to make anymore, because it's an entry level job or it's a mid level job. And you're now at the point with 20 years experience where you should be at a senior level job. But you've stayed put or stayed in a rut too long. So keep learning every day, get out. Uh, I kind of look at the future, and with longevity, I plan on being alive for a long time. And I plan on wanting to stay vibrant and working for a long time. And some of it might be part time working or consulting at some point in my later career. But if we are not continuing to learn and invest in ourselves, we will lose relevancy. And that is heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well said. We got to make time for it. Well, our time's gone by really fast,
Okay.
Janet. It's crazy. What's the best way for people to stay connected to you, Janet?
Sure. Well, my email address is simple, Janet at CELPR.com. And I am also on LinkedIn and on Twitter at JSwitch, SWITCH.
So that's a little bit easier to spell than Swiecichowski.
It
Um,
is.
I love it. Well, we're going to make sure to link that in the show notes. Certainly check out what CEL is doing as well, because they're doing amazing things to help schools and organizations across the country. But this was a great conversation, Janet, and I think people are really going to enjoy learning some of these different opportunities. And my challenge to you as you're listening is what's your next step? And don't get overwhelmed, because we talked about a lot, but just what's that next thing that could really help you in your growth, in your career, in your responsibilities now, and seek that out. And if you don't know, ask other people, right? There's a lot of people around that can share what they've done, but we've obviously laid out a lot of opportunities for you. But now my charge is to take action. Any last parting words from you, Janet?
Well, thank you for all the education and free stuff, free tips that you are providing schools across the country. We are at such a difficult time, and our school communicators need all the support they can get. And you just always step up to the bat, and you're so appreciated.
Thank you so much. And I hang out with really smart people like you, which is part of my continuous development and professional development as well. But thanks everybody for tuning in today. We look forward to seeing you next week with another great episode. Thanks so much, Janet. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.